What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for MLB Friday, June 18th.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon.
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top DFS picks for today's MLB slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have a 15-game slate tonight, so let's take a look at the pitcher position. I like Trevor Bauer with a 6% pitching advantage over the Arizona Diamondbacks. Trevor Bauer is only giving up a .456 OPS versus righties, and he's facing 4 righties here tonight. On top of that, the Diamondbacks have only hit 12 of his last 56 pitches. That's a .214 batting average, and Trevor Bauer is $10,500 FanDuel salary, and he's 100 more on DraftKings. Projected at 29.9 fantasy points here tonight. He has an ERA of 2.64. His record is 6-5 on the season, pitching an average of 105 pitches per game. That's a ton of pitches. Plenty of opportunity to rack up those fantasy points. And he's averaging 43 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 31, 34, and 36 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Trevor Bauer here versus the Arizona Diamondbacks. Now I also like Carlos Rodon with a 21% pitching advantage over a low salary batting team, the Houston Astros. Carlos Rodon is only giving up a .478 OPS versus righties, and he's facing 6 righties here tonight. And on top of that, the Astros have only hit 13 out of his last 55 pitches. That's a .236 batting average. He's $10,200 FanDuel salary, and he's 600 more on DraftKings. Projected at 21.6 fantasy points here tonight, but I think that should be closer to 30 fantasy points. His ERA is only 1.89. His record is 6-2 on the season, pitching an average of 100 pitches per game, averaging 46 fantasy points per game. He scored 55, 36, and 27 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Carlos Rodon here versus the Houston Astros. Okay, let's take a look at the catcher first base position. I like Jake Cronenworth with a 40% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Tony Santillan. Jake Cronenworth, he's batting 33% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .880 OPS versus righties. And Tony Santillan, he's giving up a .808 OPS versus lefties. There's no at-bats versus Santillan yet, and Jake Cronenworth is only $2,700 FanDuel salary. So I think he's got a nice salary on FanDuel. He's projected at 9.3 fantasy points here tonight. He's averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 9, 16, and 6 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Jake Cronenworth here versus Tony Santillan. Okay, let's take a look at the second base position. I like Ty France with a 15% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Michael Wacha. Ty France is batting 17% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .858 OPS versus righties. And Michael Wacha is giving up a .909 OPS versus righties. There's no at-bats versus Wacha yet, and Ty France is $3,200 FanDuel salary, and he's $500 less on DraftKings. So I like that price on both sites, but I love that DraftKings price. He's projected at 10.3 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season, and he's been on fire, scoring 22, 13, and 34 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Ty France here versus Michael Wacha. Okay, let's take a look at the third base position. I like Austin Riley with a 21% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Carlos Martinez. Austin Riley, he bats pretty much the same versus lefty and righties, batting a .789 OPS versus righties. And Carlos Martinez, he pitches 22% worse to righties as he does lefties. He pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, giving up a .949 OPS versus righties. There's no at-bats versus Martinez yet, and Austin Riley is only $3,000 FanDuel salary. He's $1,500 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.6 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 0, 6, and 7 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I think he's due for a good game here, and Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 9.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Austin Riley here versus Carlos Martinez.
Real quick guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Another third baseman that I like is Josh Donaldson with a 32% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Mike Foltzy. Josh Donaldson is batting 5% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .806 OPS versus righties, and Mike Foltzy throws his worst ball by far to righty batters. 27% worse than his pitch to lefties, and almost double worse, or 2 times as bad as he does to switch hitters, giving up a 1.627 OPS versus righties. So that is just an awful OPS versus righties. There's no at-bats versus Foltzy yet, and Josh Donaldson is $3,600 FanDuel salary. He's $1,500 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.9 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 10, 0, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games, but I like this pick because Josh Donaldson has a pretty good chance to hit a home run here tonight versus Foltzy. So I like Josh Donaldson here versus Mike Foltzy. Okay, who do we have at the shortstop position? I'm going to give you a value play here. I like Freddie Galvis with a 9% pitching advantage over Robbie Ray. Freddie Galvis bats 11% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .788 OPS versus lefties. And Robbie Ray is giving up a .746 OPS versus switch hitters. Now I like this pick because Freddie Galvis is 8 for 24, batting a .333 batting average and a .718 OPS versus Ray. So I also like this pick because he's only $2,500 FanDuel salary. He's $1,000 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.1 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 3, 13, and 9 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Freddie Galvis here versus Robbie Ray. Okay, and the other guy that's looking pretty good here at the shortstop position is Dansby Swanson. Let me just take a look at his batting average. He has a .235 batting average, but he's got a 34% batting advantage over the low salary pitcher, Carlos Martinez. Dansby Swanson is batting 12% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .782 OPS versus righties, and Carlos Martinez throws his worst ball versus righty batters, giving up a .949 OPS versus righties. Now, Dansby Swanson is only 1 for 7 versus Martinez, so it's not a great start, but he does have good splits here tonight, and he's only $2,700 FanDuel salary. He's $1,000 more on DraftKings. So if you don't want to go with Freddie Galvis versus a better pitcher in Robbie Ray, although Dansby Swanson doesn't have a better batter versus pitcher matchup, he is facing a weaker opponent here, and he's projected at 9.8 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 6, 38, and 9 fantasy points in his last 3 games. And Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game, 9.5 runs scored in this game. So I like Dansby Swanson here versus Carlos Martinez. Okay, moving on to the outfield position. Here's a stud pick for you. I think he's worth paying up for. Take a look at Ronald Acuna Jr. You can add this guy to your stack. Ronald Acuna Jr. has a 27% batting advantage over that same low salary pitcher, Carlos Martinez. Ronald Acuna Jr. is batting 5% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .998 OPS versus righties. And we know Carlos Martinez throws his worst ball versus righty batters, giving up a .949 OPS versus righties. And I like this pick because Ronald Acuna Jr. is 4 for 4, batting a perfect 1.0 versus Martinez with a 3.0 OPS. He's got 2 singles, a double, and a home run. He's $4,500 FanDuel salary. He's $1,800 more on DraftKings, projected at 13.6 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 15 fantasy points per game on the season. He's been on fire, scoring 19, 22, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games. We know Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 9.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I think this is a great game to stack those righties versus Carlos Martinez. So please don't let us down. I like Ronald Acuna Jr. here versus Carlos Martinez.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.